Sean here from Sean Teaches N8N. This is part 2 of my N8N Fundamentals series, where I break down the core concepts that you need to master automation. In the last video, we looked at webhooks versus APIs. In today's video, we are diving deep into HTTP requests, what they are, how they work, and how to use them in N8N. I'm not some expert with 10 years experience. I'm documenting my journey as a complete beginner to building real automation workflows. So if you have ever felt confused about HTTP requests, status codes, or headers, well, you're in the right place. So let's start with the absolute basics. HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Now, I know this sounds super technical, and it did for me at the start as well, but I'm going to give you an analogy that really helps you understand it. Think of HTTP requests like ordering food at a restaurant. You are the client, the customer. The kitchen is the server, and the waiter is the HTTP request carrying the messages back and forth. When you want to see a web page, you're on your browser and that's you. So you're the client. The client, so you, sends a HTTP request to a server asking to see that page. The server then processes that and sends you back a response with the data that you asked for. So just like you telling the waiter, I'll have the burger, and in the kitchen is sending you back that burger. The beautiful thing about HTTP is that it's the universal language of the web. So every website, every API, and any online service uses HTTP to communicate. So once you understand this, you can make any system talk to any other system in N8N. Now, here's where it gets interesting. There are 4 different types of HTTP requests, and they're called HTTP methods. And the 4 most common ones that you'll use in N8N are get, post, put, and delete. So let's go back to our restaurant analogy to understand each one. Get is like asking to see the menu. You're requesting information, but you're not actually changing anything. When you visit a website, you are sending a GET request. When you use N8N to fetch data from an API, like getting a list of your Google Drive files, that is a GET request. GET requests are read-only. They retrieve data without modifying it. Post is like placing your order. You're sending new information to the server to create something. When you fill out a form on a website, you are using post. In N8N, when you create a new record on Airtable or send a message to Slack, you are using post. Post requests create new data on the server. So put. Put is like changing your order before it's made. You're updating existing information. In N8N, if you're updating a task status in your project management tool, that is a typical put request. Put requests update existing data. So finally we have delete. Delete is exactly what it sounds like. You're asking for something to be removed from the server. So like cancelling your order. You delete a file or you remove a database entry. In N8N, when you delete a row from a spreadsheet on your Google Sheets, that is a delete request. Delete requests remove data from the server. Okay, so next we're going to look at when you send that HTTP request, how do we know if that worked? And if you're wondering why I changed jumper, it's because I couldn't record the whole video yesterday, so we're doing a new one today. But we're continuing on straight from yesterday. So how do we know if that worked? So that's where status codes comes in. The server sends you back a 3-digit code to tell you what's after happening. Think of it like the expression on your waiter's face when they come back from the kitchen. Just to show you before we explained what the numbers of the status means, here we have status 200 for all of these. I have just a little test network here open here. So we see status 200 for all of these searches. That is just basically saying that it's a success. So as I just explained, status codes in the 200s mean success. Your request has worked perfectly. So 200, your request has worked perfectly and here's your data. 201 means your post request has created something new. And 204 means no content. Request was successful, but there's nothing to send back. So status codes in the 400s mean you, the client, have done something wrong. Maybe you asked for something that doesn't exist, or you provided the wrong information. So the four of them are, so the first one is 400, bad request. Your request was formatted incorrectly. 401 is unauthorized, that you need to provide login details. 403 is forbidden, that you're logged in but you don't have any permissions. And 404 is page not found. This is the most famous one. It means that the page you're looking for doesn't exist. This one has personally always bugged me and I never knew what it kind of meant. Then status codes in the 500s mean that it was the server's issues, not yours. So your request is fine, but something went wrong on their end. So 500, that means it was an internal server error. Something broke on that server. 502 is a bad gateway. So the server got an invalid response from another server. Then we have the 503 service unavailable. That means that the service is temporarily down or overloaded. When you're debugging workflows in N8N, these status codes are gold. So if you get a 401, you know you need to fix your authentication. If you get a 404, like you see here, you know the endpoint URL is wrong. And also with if you get a 500, it's not your fault, the API is having issues. Now let's talk about headers. Headers are like the envelope around the letter. The letter itself is the main content, but the envelope also has important metadata. So like who it was for, who it was from, when it was sent, or how urgent it is. HTTP headers work the same way. They're additional information set alongside your response or request. Let me show you the most common examples that you're going to use in N8N. The content type header tells you what format your data is in. The most common one would be application/JSON. Other common types include application/XML for XML data, or plain/text for plain text. The authorization header is how you prove that you have access to these resources. It's like showing your ID at a club. The most common formats would be bearer your API token. In N8N, you'll often use this to authenticate with other APIs. So for the accept header on the right, this tells us what format we want the response back in. And here this is telling it, please give me JSON back. So here's the thing about headers. Most of the time, N8N will do it automatically for you. But when you're working with custom APIs or troubleshooting issues, knowing how to manually set your headers is crucial. Okay, so now we have the last piece of the puzzle, which is the request body. This is where you put the actual data that you're sending to the server. So going back to our restaurant analogy, if the HTTP method is what you're actually doing, like placing the order, then the body is the details. So I want the burger, no onions, and extra pickles. Not all requests need bodies. Remember GET requests? Those are just asking for information, so they don't need bodies. But POST and PUT requests, where you're updating or creating data, those definitely need bodies. Here's a real example. So let's say you wanted to create a new contact in your CRM using a POST request. Well, your request body might look like this example that I'm showing you above my head here. Once you become comfortable with JSON, working with APIs becomes so much easier. And I also have a short explaining quickly under a minute what JSON actually is and a bit about understanding that. So I'll leave a link in the comments for that video. But also from our part 3, we're going to be covering data mapping and working with JSON also. So stay tuned for that one. Okay, so enough theory and let's build something real. So I'm going to show you how to make a HTTP GET request to a public API, then a POST request to send that data somewhere. This is going to tie everything that we've learned together. So just in case you get lost in the middle of this example, we're going to be using a JSON placeholder API. It's a free, fake REST API that's it's just perfect for learning and for testing. So for our test example here, we're going to just add in a manual trigger, and then we're going to add our HTTP request node, and the method we're going to keep it as get, and here we're just going to use our test API. We're going to execute that step, and then when it loads, we're going to see here that we just made a GET request to fetch a list of users, and you can see here at the output we got back JSON data with the user information. And also this status code is going to be 200, which means it's a success. Notice how N8N automatically set the headers to application/JSON for us. We can see all the response headers here too. This is the actual HTTP response we talked about earlier. Okay, so for our second example, we've just added a new HTTP request node. So instead of the GET method, we're going to be using POST. And here the URL is just the test API we're using, but instead of users in the previous example, we're using posts. And we're going to come down here to toggle on send body. And here it's going to ask us to specify a body we want to use. So instead of using fields below, we are using JSON. So I'm just going to paste in our JSON data from example 1. And once we click execute step, here we go. We've successfully created our post. And if you remember back to our status codes, this will be status code 201, which means we've successfully created a new resource. And if you look at the output we got, so we got our data back, but we also got an ID 101. So the server has just assigned us an ID also. So let's recap the 5 main points that you need to take from today's video. The first one is HTTP requests are how a client and a server communicate, like ordering at a restaurant. 2. There are 4 main HTTP methods: GET, which is read; POST, which is create; PUT, which is update; and delete, which is remove. Number 3 is that status codes tell you if your request has succeeded. So status code in the 200s mean your request was a success. In the 400s means that it was the client's error, your error. And in the 500s, that means that it was the server's error. Number 4 is that headers contain important metadata about your request, like content type and authorization. And the 5th and final point that you need to take from today's video is that the request body contains the actual data that you're sending, usually in JSON format. Once you understand HTTP requests, you can connect to any API, any service, and automate just about anything with N8N. These are literally just the foundations of automation. In part 3 of this series, we're tackling data mapping and working with JSON, because knowing how to manipulate and structure data is what separates basic automation from powerful automation. So if you found this video any bit informational or helpful, please make sure to subscribe and follow along. I'll be uploading videos here about 2 or 3 times a week, and I'm documenting my journey from an N8N beginner to building a profitable automation business. Also, drop a comment below and let me know what was your biggest "that makes sense" moment. Was it the restaurant analogy about HTTP methods, or was it the status codes explanation? Let me know what clicked for you. So that's all for this video. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in part 3 of the N8N Fundamental series.